Welcome to the Filmlings Podcast,
a weekly podcast where we analyze all that goes into effective filmmaking.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Alex.
And this is week 17, Bougie Buñuel. And we have faces.
Yeah, we exist. We are not just voices coming through your headphones. We are real people.
So for anyone who is just listening to the audio, we are trying out a special videoed episode because Alex is not in New York anymore.
Yeah. It's kind of rare that we're in the same town these days, and it was nice. I'm moving from New York to LA, and this is a chance to not only hang out with Jonathan, but hang out with our audience through a camera, of course. But
yeah. We're see how this goes. But other than that, podcast should be pretty much the same.
Well, it'll be weird.
Yeah.
It'll be a weird podcast.
It's a weird week.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about?
We're going to be talking about the films slash scandals of Louis Buñuel, who is he's Spanish. He's a Spanish filmmaker. Mm-hmm. He's did a lot of his work in France and Mexico, though. And he, along with Salvador Dali, are kind of the leading edge of the surrealism movement.
As far as film goes.
Yeah. It kind of it existed before film.
Right.
Yeah,
it kind of took off around the same time that films were starting. So the artists would, some of them had an inclination towards film, and so there was kind of that crossover. It was kind of at the same time, but I think the majority of the surrealist movement was more within painting and poetry and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and this is what at a very early. This is the earliest we've gone so far in terms of film history.
Yeah,
on the podcast. The earliest film we've done before this is Lifeboat.
Right, 1944. But this week we have L'Ajor, which is 1930, and we'll be talking about Un Chien, andalou also, which is the year before that, 1929.
Yeah. So art isn't, not art. Film was not as artsy as it is nowadays.
Yeah.
So and Louis Buñuel and crew kind of come in and shake that all up.
Yeah.
And also maybe not intentionally either.
Right. And he's not the earliest surrealist filmmaker. You have Man Ray and Germain Dulac and the other guy I'm blanking on. I just watched all of these. Go to my Twitter account and look at all the surrealist stuff, because I went down to a deep and strange surrealist rabbit hole this week.
Yeah. I did not. So I just watched the movies that were on the on our list this week, and I liked them. They were weird. I don't think I entirely got them, but I also don't think they're entirely meant to be got. Yeah,
it gives you something to think about, but also kind of warns you not to think too hard about them.
Yeah, for sure. So do you want to give us kind of a brief overview of who Buñuel is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Buñuel was born in the year 1900, and he lived till 1983. And he was born to some pretty wealthy parents in a small town in Spain. And at some point, he went off to study in Paris and joined up with the Surrealist movement, and created a couple films, and then kind of took a 15-year hiatus from filmmaking, just kind of doing stuff. He did a little bit of work in the States, and then he went to Mexico and ended up making at least 20 films in Mexico. So that was kind of the meat of his film career, and then he came back to Paris later in his life and created a few more films, some of his most famous films, actually. And then I think he was still living in Mexico City when he died. But yeah, he's we also want to give a little overview of what surrealism was. It was kind of a social movement of a bunch of people in the bourgeoisie, the upper class, the middle upper class. But the way I kind of think about it is a social temper tantrum, whereas a bunch of these people in the bourgeoisie class kind of rebelling against their own class and about all these kind of formalities and social conventions that had been built up in the bourgeoisie society. And they were like, oh, all this ritual and stuff is stupid. So what happens if we just do something totally inappropriate? Like, can we kind of change the way that this portion of society functions?
Yeah, I kind of like to think about it as like if you've ever met a hipster who likes to criticize hipsters.
Yeah.
Like kind of like that idea.
I was thinking about millennials and that kind of thing a lot during this week.
Yeah, for sure. But that is a good thing to keep in mind as we talk about these films, and they sound super critical of the bourgeoisie, which they are. But Louis Buñuel is coming from inside that system.
Right.
He's definitely is a bourgeois kid talking about the bourgeoisie and talking bad about them.
Absolutely.
Or at least making them go, huh, a lot.
Yeah, and get mad at him. He was exiled from Spain for a while.
He was actually exiled?
Yeah, he was
like
actually
legally
exiled.
Well, Spain went kind of through a weird period there, to be fair.
Like Buñuel lived through the the Spanish Civil War and the World Wars. Both World Wars. Yeah.
He was born in 1900. He was there.
1900. So
both of them.
He went through a lot of stuff. He wasn't super involved in either of the World Wars, but he was more associated with the Spanish Civil War because that's where his family was from.
Yeah, I always associate him with Picasso, just because Picasso is also like the Spanish, French, World War, Spanish Civil War type deal, even though he didn't like Picasso.
Yeah, well, he liked Picasso as a friend, but he was not super fond of his artwork.
Yeah, he takes some time in his biography to really criticize Guernica.
Yeah,
like big time.
And we'll be talking about Louis Buñuel's biography because I kind of read through it this week to get try and get a more understanding of these movies if that's possible.
Yeah, he's a fascinating character, and that definitely comes through in his films.
Yeah, and that biography is My Last Sigh by Louis Buñuel. Free plug of the week. You can actually see it this time.
Physical props.
Yeah, it's a weird book. Not for everybody, but if you're really interested in if you're really interested in film history and this one little strange movement called surrealism, it's definitely an insightful book. Oh yeah, so that's a little bit about the climate that the films that we're gonna be talking about were created in, or at least forged the creator of these films, because the surrealist movement was really short. It only lasted until like the mid 30s, and Buñuel made films up until the 70s. So by the time he gets to some of the later films we'll be talking about, the surrealist movement had kind of died and stuff, but like that involvement he had with that group kind of seeped its way deep into him, and it follows him through all of his work, and his films almost get more surreal the later that we go. So what films are we talking about, Alex?
Yeah, so we're taking a look at actually 4 films, 3 features and a short.
Yeah.
And the first 2 are the short, and the first feature he did 1929 and 1930 respectively. The first one is Un Chien, andalou, and the second one is L'Âge d'Or.
Yeah, so disclaimer, there's going to be French words in this podcast that we're probably saying wrong.
Yeah, I don't speak French. No, I cannot pronounce. I can barely pronounce English.
Right.
So
I took 2 semesters of French, but I do not claim to know how to say all the words we'll be saying today.
Right. But these are some very interesting films. And before we get into them too deeply, the only thing you should know is that both of them caused... No, not the first one, but the second one definitely caused riots.
Right.
The feature
first one
film
caused a lot of kind of anger. It was censored. A lot of his films were censored, but
which kind of means like it was banned in the country.
Right.
Essentially,
so like,
in France, it was not shown until 1960.
Like private screenings and stuff. Yeah, L'Âge d'Or, especially though, because it was a bigger thing. Un Chien andalou was a short film. It's about 17 minutes. You can find it online. We'll include a link to that. And you can also find L'Âge d'Or online, and we'll include a link to that. But Un Chien was kind of a smaller thing. It was like a 20 minutes, like I said. But then L'Âge d'Or was like actually opening in theaters and stuff. And actually provoked actual riots of people who
actual
were
riots
vandalizing theaters,
who came and
stuff.
stormed the theater because they didn't like the content and wrecked it. And then the French police were like, let's shut this down.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to say that was a wise idea for at least the time being.
Yeah.
Not that I agree with censorship of art, but maybe preventing riots.
I want to say that Buñuel actually named a character in one of his later films after the police chief that shut down the theater for L'Age d'Or.
Yep, that sounds like Buñuel. Yep. So the other two films we're talking about are a big leap forward in time.
Right. And like I said, after
30 and 40 years respectively.
Yeah, after L'Age d'Or, he created one more kind of short documentary, mockumentary kind of movie called Las Verdes, or The Land Without Bread. And then he went like 15 years before making a movie again. And then these are a couple years after he got back into his filmmaking.
Right. So first of the latter two, in 1962, we have The Exterminating Angel, which was from his period of films that were made in Mexico.
Yeah.
So that one's in Spanish, Mexican Spanish.
The only Spanish film. The other two are in French.
Right. The other two are in French. And the last one is The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie from 1972, where he's back in Paris. And this one actually won Best Picture for Foreign Language Film.
Yeah, the Oscars.
Yeah, and it also really reminds me of Altman film. So it just to give you a preview, if you know what an Altman film feels like Nashville or the first MASH, the MASH movie, then that's kind of the vibe of it, but more surreal for sure.
Yeah, definitely strange, kind of vignette-ish.
Right. So with that, let's hop into our actual breakdowns of the individual films. And let's start with the weirdest, I think, film.
Maybe the weirdest film ever put to celluloid.
Which it was meant to be weird.
Yeah.
If you're wondering, like, it's not just... It's
not
meant
just
to,
us not
it's
being
meant
able
to
to handle
shock.
it. Yeah.
When you said this is a social temper tantrum, this is literally him trying to shock other bourgeoisie. He went to the premiere with rocks in his pocket in case
there were riots.
In case there were riots. Him and Salvador Dali, and Dali did help him on this film, right?
Yeah. Are we starting with Un Chien, andalou?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this was a collaboration between Louis Buñuel and Salvador Dali, and from what you could tell, it's like perfect collaboration. They had all these ideas that were kind of meshing. Their ideas were bouncing off, and they were agreeing and stuff. Like basically, their rule for this film was, if we have any idea that rationally follows from the previous thing that happened in the movie, we can't use it. So it was intentionally a string of nonsensical, irrational images and actions. Just one after another for 17 minutes. And it kind of started because Louis Buñuel and Salvador Dali were talking one day, and Louis Buñuel was like, I had this weird dream where a cloud kind of went in front of the moon, almost like a razor blade slicing an eye. And Salvador Dali said, and that's weird, I had a dream where ants were coming out of my hand in this weird... So they took those two images and built this whole film around them with other... weird things.
Yeah, it feels really random.
Yeah.
And kind of the idea behind one of the ideas behind surrealism is kind of like freeform thought. Kind of. I always think of it freeform jazz, where you just kind of like go with it and see what comes out. And that's the best way I find to intro the idea of surrealism in film to people who haven't seen it before, especially with Un Chien andalou, because it's just basically a random set of films. And if you're
images with the same people,
images, not a set of films. It is a film.
Yeah, it's a film.
But I found myself when I watch it and other surrealist films, trying to assign meaning to the random films, because that's what you do when you watch a film, and that was kind of their point when they tried to show it to all these high class bourgeoisie types at the screening, was basically punk them.
Yeah, that they would be looking for something deep and insightful, and then when they wouldn't be able to find it, they would get upset. But that didn't exactly happen.
They liked it.
They loved
it. That's so weird. It's the most film snobbish thing I could think of.
Yeah, but I will say that like the inclination to read meaning into this isn't totally unwarranted, because the images that they use are incredibly provocative and symbolic. So it's like he shows one character pulling 2 ropes over his shoulders that have like the 10 Commandments on them, and then they have 2 priests, and then they have 2 pianos that have dead cows in them. So it's like, it feels like it's trying to say something. It feels like a commentary, but it's not. And he kind of had a little bit of commentary later on in his work, but this film is just,
Yeah, I almost feel like it's not like you're right. Like I almost feel like it's not a bad urge to try to assign meaning to things, because that's kind of what we do in real life too. When we're faced with a random set of things or circumstances, is try to assign meaning to it. And so if a film provides a bunch of really striking, provocative, in this case, I find the images a little gross.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And they're meant to be grotesque and shocking, but in like a weirdly cinematic way that's almost beautiful if it wasn't so grotesque.
There's actually a story in My Last Sigh where Louis Buñuel says that Charlie Chaplin used to describe scenes from the movie to his daughter to freak her out. Not showing them to her, but just like describing what happens, because you see an eyeball get slit open, which was actually a calf's eyeball that they kind of made up to look like.
Oh, that was actually a cow's eyeball?
Yeah.
I thought it was just like a grape or something.
No, it was an actual eyeball. So if you ever wanted to know what that looks like.
No, I don't think I'm going to watch that again.
Yeah, now that you know.
But anyway, what I was trying to get at was, I think it's a natural thing that we humans do, try to assign meaning to random things. And I think that's part of art too, is the audience's interpretation. So even if this is a set of really shocking images set to punk the bourgeoisie in 1929 Paris, if you can put them together and have fun putting some meaning to it, or trying to put meaning to it, because I can't get to anything with this. Right. But if you can try, then I think that's still a point of art and a point of film, of trying to get something out of it, which is a fascinating thing when you take a look at the surrealist stuff.
As long as you kind of understand that there really isn't anything there, but like you can find something, but just know that the artist put it there to not have meaning. Yeah,
there's no intentional artist meaning in this, which is a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, and later on, he would say that the film is kind of almost a call to murder, like a call to anarchy and stuff. And the Surrealists were,
I could see that,
pretty heavily involved in anarchist movements and communist movements and stuff. So there's a lot of political upheaval happening in France and Spain at the time.
Yep. That sounds like...
But I don't know how accurate that is, because it almost feels like he had given that excuse to save face with the Surrealists, because the Surrealists had started calling him out on being a commercial sellout and stuff once people started wanting the script and stuff for the film. And so he was like, no, this is a call for murder, just to take off all the newspapers.
Artists have to eat, people.
Yeah,
artists have to eat.
And that's what we see a lot of the films that we skipped over, especially from the Mexico period, was Louis Buñuel kind of just trying to keep his family fed and stuff like that. So he said sometimes he would take gigs that wouldn't necessarily associate with his his personal subject matter taste, but he said he never created a scene that compromised his artistic vision or his personal morality. So
right. So let's talk also about L'Âge d'Or, which kind of goes with it for sure. And that's the feature film, although it wasn't supposed to be a feature film. Some people, correct me if I'm wrong on this, you're definitely the Buñuel expert this week compared to me.
I binged his book this week, so that's my only source right now.
You know more than me. So he was hired to create a 20-minute film, and he ended up making an hour-long film.
Right. So basically some bourgeois people had seen Un Chien andalou, were intrigued by it and were like, hey, we will fund you to make another movie.
Yeah.
Another 20-minute movie, kind of the same as Un Chien, andalou. It started out as he started collaborating with Salvador Dali again, but then that relationship got a little rocky. There was some weird tension with the lady who would later become Salvador Dali's wife.
Didn't Buñuel just not like her?
Yeah, he didn't like her very much, and Dali was like obsessed with her.
Yep.
So they kind of parted ways, but they were still friends. Buñuel respected Dali's art and recognized his kind of artistic genius, but they maintained communication throughout their lives. And there's one scene in the film that was a suggestion from Dali. I think it was the scene where the guy is walking through a garden with a rock on his head for no reason. And then there's a statue with a rock on its head too that he passes by.
Yeah. That was interesting. I didn't get it, but it was interesting.
Yeah, you're not supposed to. So L'Âge d'Or has a little bit more of a through line. Yeah,
it actually kind of has a plot. If you noticed, we didn't describe the plot on Un Chien, andalou because there's not one.
Yeah, we could only describe images. There's two statue people stuck in the sand. There's a guy wearing a weird bib and skirt riding a bike and he falls over.
Flaps.
Yeah. And then there's a hand in a box, isn't there?
Yep. And there's a tie in a box.
Yeah. So we can only describe images. There's ants coming out of the hand, which you see, which kind of just makes your skin crawl a little bit.
There's the eyeball getting sliced, which is juxtaposed with the moon being sliced by a cloud.
I think that first guy in the first shot with the eyeball slicing was Louis Buñuel, actually.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, I believe so.
That's interesting. I totally believe it because I don't know what he looks like.
Right.
And the only thing I know about Dali is his mustache. Which he didn't always have. There's some pictures in my last side that early Salvador Dali, he looks quite different. It was some late in life.
Actually, Salvador Dali was one of those priests that was on the rope with the piano on them. He was actually one of those. Yeah.
Hey, can you get me in this film? Can you be a priest tied to a rope? Yeah, I'll do it.
Go for it.
Go for it. Whatever it takes, guys. Just get in the movie.
Yeah, but L'Âge d'Or is actually about two people who are trying to be intimate with each other, but they keep getting interrupted by people, and also they're terrible.
Oh, they're not.
They don't know what they're doing with each other whenever they actually do get alone, and weird stuff happens. And this is a theme that kind of runs through the three films that we picked for this week that we didn't realize this theme was going to run through because we hadn't seen any of these, either of us.
Nope.
I'd seen Un Chien, andalou, and from there I kind of was fascinated with Buñuel because it's such a strange film, but we hadn't seen any of these, and but the theme that kind of runs through them is this idea of thwarted desire or an objective that you're trying to reach to but you just can't get to for whatever reason.
Yeah, which I think is just probably something that resonates with Buñuel.
Yeah.
So it ends up in his work a lot,
right?
And you know Buñuel better than I do. So if there's something in his track record that shows that he strives for a desire he can't reach. I don't know, we're starting to sound like what's that thing with your constellation that you try to, your horoscope.
Oh,
yeah, we're starting to sound like
there's
astronomers.
Buñuel talks about how psychoanalysts will declare him unanalyzable.
I believe
makes
it.
No sense. He's like, I don't really care about psychoanalysts or what they think. I just kind of do my own thing. So we shouldn't go too far down this rabbit hole of trying to find some past motivation for his films. He just kind of does whatever he feels like at the moment.
Yeah, he just kind of does it, which, that works with when you watch his films, what it feels like. But we should talk about how, Un Chien, andalou was received shockingly well by its first audience. L'Âge d'Or
was not.
Caused some... This is the one that caused riots.
Yeah. It was showing at a theater that had some surrealist art in the foyer and stuff, and those artworks were actually slashed. And
because to say that it had some suggestive imagery was putting it mildly.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't have anything actually graphic, but it's pretty obvious what they're saying
a couple times. And then there's other things that are just, strangely violent. There's
like the guy kicking the dog. That like deeply upset me. I really love dogs.
I warned you about it.
Yeah, I knew it was coming. I thought it would be like super obviously fake, but when I watched it, I was like, no, that guy just kicked a dog. Like,
yeah, he punted a dog.
Yeah, and whenever anything bad happened to him throughout the rest of the film, I was like, yeah, you deserve it. But he was strangely violent with like everyone he met.
Yeah, there was some blind guy trying to hail a carriage, and he just
like randomly like kicks him and pushes him over.
Chest, and then takes the cab. And then, there's a cow in a bed. There's
bed cow. Hashtag bed cows.
Hashtag bed cows. And then, carriages in the middle of a dinner party. We watched a lot of dinner parties this week.
You can tell Louis Buñuel is obsessed with the idea of a dinner party.
Or he just hates going to dinner parties, and this is his way of venting.
Well, he probably actually does hate going to dinner parties because he likes to rage against the bourgeois society and polite manners and rules of behavior that go into a dinner party.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, like a dinner party is the perfect place to analyze how people act.
Yeah.
There's just so many cultural and societal do's and don'ts, taboos and habits that go into food and interacting with other people. And when you sit around a table, it's unavoidable to, notice hierarchy, who sits where and stuff. Right. So, it's just a good people into a culture, but especially if you want to criticize bourgeois culture,
right?
That's a good way to do it.
But we'll save most of that conversation for the next film.
Yeah. And I also feel like we're going to set a record for how many times anyone said bourgeois in a 1 hour sitting.
Yeah.
For sure.
Bourgeois.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see Buñuel go from Un Chien, andalou to L'Âge d'Or and kind of develop a structure. But he's still kind of subverting what you expect to see in a traditional film. Even at 1930, this was kind of developed to the point where you have acts and you have a through plot line that you stick with and you follow, and you see this whatever story you're following, you follow from beginning to end. But with Buñuel, it gets a little more disjointed and thematically connected.
Yeah, so some of his films, especially the ones that we looked at, the more kind of heavily surrealist films, you could see that there's a through line that's almost just a vehicle for scenarios. So he'll just come up with, and he kind of like, especially for L'Âge d'Or, he had a notebook that he had been keeping notes in since Un Chien andalou of like all these different things that could happen and would look interesting on film. And then he kind of pulls them all together. He kind of has this story of these two people trying to get together. And while they're trying to get together, all these things happen kind of randomly. So she goes into her bedroom and there's a cow in her bed. And then she looks into her mirror and there's clouds in the mirror. And then
sometimes happens.
The other guy calls somebody and the guy he calls after they hang up falls onto the ceiling.
Yeah, that was weird.
That was super random.
I say it's weird, like that's shocking, but it's really not. Although it is meant to be shocking.
It would have been at that time, but now we've seen so many strange things. We have David Lynch and stuff but I was still shocked at some of this stuff that happened. Like when the kid dropped his dad's whatever and the dad just shot him like it was a rabbit hunt.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, wait, what?
The second he messed with the guy with the gun, is that supposed to be his dad?
It's supposed to be his dad.
It's supposed to be his dad. I was like, that guy's going to shoot him, isn't he? Like he's going to shoot the kid. But it was still like really weird. Like that's not what you would expect to happen.
And they built up this tension where he's aiming the gun. We cut to the kid like running away, and then I'm like, okay, you still have a second for like something to interrupt what's going to happen, because in a normal movie something would kind of interrupt it, and it was just like that tension that was built up. But it's like builds up the tension, and then he just shoots him.
Yeah,
and then he shoots him again after he's already dead.
Yeah. There's a lot of subversion of expectations. There's also this big. I feel like his emphasis is always on scenes. Especially in his earlier work. Like you said, like he keeps a list of scene ideas that he's just kind of like doing and churning out. And then kind of like connecting it loosely through in some way, shape, or form. Whether that be, in Un Chien andalou, he kind of did it with imagery. And then in L'Âge d'Or, he did it with plot. And I don't think either of those things that I just said were ever crossed his mind consciously. I think they just kind of happened. But as we go forward into these next two films, we kind of see them take on almost
Discreet
like
Charm, especially
a Buñuel format,
right?
Even if he's not a big fan of format,
Which follows, and I watched a couple other of his films, and he says in his autobiography that he considers the Milky Way, the Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, and the Phantom of Liberty as a kind of trilogy, and they follow what you're just saying. It's like there's this thing that's a couple of characters trying to do a thing, but it's just a vehicle to have scenarios happen that are interesting.
Yeah.
So in Phantom of Liberty, which we aren't talking about, but like there's a pretty famous scene where all the characters come in and it's like set up like a dinner party, but they're at a table and there's a bunch of toilets and they all sit down on the toilet like it's the restroom is the social place. And then he's like, excuse me, where's the dining room? And then he goes into this little secluded room and like eats a meal by himself. Like it's and the little girl says, "Mommy, I'm hungry." She's like, "Don't use those kind of words at the table." So just this total subversion of the social culture. But I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with bigger, like you get the sense that scene exists because he was like, what if we socialized on the toilet and we like ate dinner in private?
Yeah.
And it's just like that one scene through the
it captures that provocative nature that is surrealism. Right.
Yeah, and like you were saying about, developing a story around kind of disjointed themes, there's a quote from the book that says, the essential thing about a script is, in the last analysis, suspense. The talent for developing a plot so effectively that a spectator's mind doesn't wander for even a moment. You can argue forever about the content of a film, its aesthetics, its style, even its moral posture, but the crucial imperative is to avoid boredom at all costs. And I think he uses these weird scenarios that, you can never guess what's coming next, so you're always a little bit on the edge of your seat, like, okay, how is this going to end? Because any character that is set up a certain way will most likely act in the opposite way that you would expect that type of character to act, especially clergy. If there's ever any kind of clergy member in a Buñuel film, they're going to do something unholy, put it that way.
Yep.
At some point, because he was very critical of the Catholic Church, as were a lot of the Surrealists. And he's critical of a lot of things, the Catholic Church and certain sciences and social order, everything.
Almost everything.
Pretty much everything.
Almost everything.
He just kind of like lived his in his own little world and was like, here, think about this differently.
Yeah. So with that, let's take a big leap forward in time.
Yeah.
To almost 32 years, actually.
32 years, yeah.
To The Exterminating Angel, which is the only film from his Mexican period that we're going to talk about.
Right.
And kind of one of his most famous films from his famous return later in life. And talk about what that is all about. So The Exterminating Angel tells the story of a group of bourgeois dinner guests at a dinner party at one of their members' mansions, and
I think they just come from a play or a show or something.
Yeah, something like that. And they can't leave. At the end of the night, they all lay down and go to sleep in the same room. And when they wake up, they slowly discover that none of them can leave the room. And they end up getting stuck there for months and months.
Yeah,
and months.
a long time.
And then stuff happens at the end. There's an ending. We just won't spoil it.
Yeah, we won't spoil it, even though like it doesn't make that much of a difference as far as like the experience of the film. But there is a little bit of a twist that I wasn't expecting. So
no, the end is really funny.
But I will say that it's not necessarily that they can't leave, almost as much as they won't leave. You know, it's again this idea of wanting something and almost a self-imposed obstruction to it. Is this? So they've basically had this dinner party. They've come to the point where polite society would say, "Okay, it was very nice to be here, and
it's
we'll
like
be
3
off."
a.m. or something.
And they just and they just keep talking and they never leave. And it's like one guy's taking off his jacket. It's like, oh, well, if he's staying, we can stay and chill. And the hosts are like, why aren't they going? We can't. And the hosts aren't going to tell them to leave because they're too polite. So it's this.
Everybody's being too polite to leave.
Exactly. It's like too polite to leave and too polite to tell anyone else to leave. So it's this.
So what if everybody's so polite that you get stuck there for weeks and then months?
Right.
Even past the point where the politeness breaks down and people are like attacking each other, both emotionally and physically. There's a few characters who don't make it.
Yeah.
It's almost like a Lord of the Flies type scenario in one room.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to those two characters.
It looked like they...
I thought it was suicide.
I thought it was... I'm pretty sure it was suicide.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. But then they never bring them up when they get out.
No.
They're just like, oh, we can all leave now. It's like, oh, well, good thing they weren't instrumental to your
getting out, right?
And also, that wasn't the wife. I thought those were the two that were having an affair. But I thought the one having the affair was the host's wife.
Well, I'll be honest, I have no idea.
I don't know.
I have no idea. I can't keep track of these characters. And part of it is, it's a foreign language film. It's in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish, so part of my attention has to be on following the subtitles.
Yeah. Although the host guy looked like a smaller John Rhys Davies.
Yeah, he kind of did.
From Raiders of the Lost Ark.
He kind of did. But also, I think they're kind of supposed to all blend together.
Yeah, because they're just representing one.
Yeah, because I like to look at it, and again, this is probably just me assigning meaning to art that isn't supposed to have this meaning. But I kind of look at it as they all start off kind of looking the same, because that's your experience in polite society, is everyone's kind of supposed to act the same, everyone kind of dresses the same, so everyone kind of looks and feels like the same person. But as they break down and they start to kind of lose it, and everyone's starting to dress like they've been on a deserted island because they're stuck in this room over time, you get sweaty and stinky. People are like wearing torn clothes and jackets come up. One guy's like wearing a jacket backwards.
Yeah.
Or a shirt. He's wearing his shirt backwards.
They're like throwing people's medicine out the room for no reason.
Yeah. As they break down, you kind of get... they reveal a little bit more of their characters. Like certain characters go crazy. Certain characters go almost feral. Yeah. Certain characters hide in a closet with their secret lovers and then off themselves. And some characters take control, like the doctor. Kind of, well, he doesn't take control, but he kind of remains like this calming voice.
Right. He's like, because he's the healing person. He has the power to help people who are getting sick, because of course they're getting sick. They're stuck in one room.
Yeah.
They're drinking out of a pipe from the wall.
Yeah. At one point they bust open the wall to reveal a water pipe because they can't leave the room to get water.
Yeah, so they don't have water. It was like at the beginning they had a servant who was on the outside, brings a tray in before they realize they can't leave. And then he gets stuck in there too.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's weird is that at the beginning, like you start to get this sense of dread in the fact that all the servants are trying to leave, like rats fleeing a sinking ship kind of a thing.
Right. Everybody else is trying to get them to stay too.
Yeah, but it's not like it's... Again, like this film is just draped in this awkward politeness where these people are like, they're trying really hard to leave, but they're not being impolite about it. They're like, no, I really need to just go. Hey, can I go with you and stuff? They're like, oh no, can you just stay until the guests leave? Like, no, I really need to get going and stuff. And so you get this sense of urgency, but they're not telling anyone what it's about or anything. They just kind of have this sense. So we're building dread without, tripping too many alarms in the audience's head.
Yeah.
And then there's bears and sheep, and I don't know how to talk about those besides just
it gets weird. Well, I mean, the weirdness really comes from the scenario over the imagery, I think, in this one. Like, it's not like it's not completely like Un Chien, andalou, where you have like razor cutting eyeballs and dead cows on pianos and stuff. But there's a couple weird things, like the goats and the bear that the hostess of the house just kind of like keeps around. Yeah. She just kind of has them around. And they come in handy at some point.
Yeah, and there's actually things like that came from real life experiences that Buñuel had, where he would go to a dinner party and the host wanted to play weird pranks on her guests, so she had a bear cub, and she had some sheep just there, and she also had one of the waiters lay on the floor and take a nap while he was carrying a tray of food. So you see that in the when the waiter trips at the beginning of the movie.
Surrealist dinner parties are weird.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That does go back to what I was saying earlier with Buñuel kind of just being more focused on the scene, especially in his earlier work, which you can see here where he's like, I want to incorporate that waiter falling into the ground, so let's have a scene with that. I want to incorporate the bear, so let's have a scene with that. But you also, it's hard to not mention that the Exterminating Angel has a much, much more constructed and structured plot than the last two films we talked about.
Is definitely... Out of all the three films that we're talking about today, it's the most almost logical, I'd say, because it follows people. They're in a room. They can't leave for a mysterious reason. It almost feels like Twilight Zone, but it's not explained as rationally as Twilight Zone would be. And he still uses it as a vehicle to incorporate things, but it's not like a series of... And it's actually recently been turned into a stage play that's showing... which makes sense because
it's in one room.
It's very contained. Yeah, it's all takes place in one room. And the surrealist elements kind of come in the form of dream sequences. So even the surreal parts are kind of explained away because there's like a weird dismembered hand that comes out.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the hand.
Yeah, like a thing. Like
that's incredibly surrealist.
Was it it or Thing from the Addams Family?
Yeah.
Something like that, but it's not just like surreal thing. The only really like surreal thing that happens that's not a dream is when the guests all come in and greet each other, and then the servants are like, okay, wait a second, and then they go back out, and the guests come in and greet each other again, and it's the same scene shot from a different angle.
Yeah,
but it just kind of makes you do a double take, like, didn't we already see this?
Yeah.
Even apparently, even the cameraman, whenever he watched the final version, he was like, hey, you put this scene in here twice. You realize that?
like, was that on purpose?
Yes, I've seen the film. I cut it that way. You shot it both ways. So
I thought you just wanted options, man.
Right.
Coverage. Yeah, and even though the inside story, the story inside the room, kind of follows that idea of polite society trapping them in the room, there is this kind of weirder, larger, like a mystery of maybe there is a weirder, larger power at stake because there's other people. There's another kind of connected storyline that we see outside of the house as first like the police, then journalists, then the army and tourists start coming to the house. And the interesting thing is we know people are stuck inside this house, but no one can make it to the front door.
Right.
No one can get there.
No one will.
No one will.
It's like one guy gets pushed and then he like comes back out and stuff. So you get the sense that, you could if you wanted to, but they just won't do it for whatever reason. It's almost a big like mass coincidence. Like everyone has like some excuse in their brain that's saying, "Oh no, I
don't want to go close."
There's a different thing to do, right?
Yeah,
but it's not like they never go up to it and then like try and put their hands on the like trying to get out of the room. They never do this weird pantomime where it would have been in like a Star Trek movie or something if they're trapped in a
where it's like
cell
some kind of like weird sci-fi
like
thing
a
that's
force
keeping
field
them in
or
the
whatever.
room.
It's just they walk up to the exit and then they turn around and sit down.
Yeah, they just can't do it. It keeps it like this weird societal convention, larger force type thing, which I think makes it more interesting than if you just saw them inside the room. Because if it was just inside the room, I think it would feel a lot more like a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah,
but with people outside, it makes it weirder. Which makes it feel a little more surreal.
Even less easy to explain away because now you've got two different sets of people.
Yeah, without resorting to some kind of like weird cop-out explanation for why they can't exit the room.
And this one feels like it has a little bit more of a perspective as far as a critique of the bourgeoisie. There's certain lines and stuff that you get. Like the one that sticks out to me is this lady's talking about how she once saw a train car full of working class people that had come off the tracks and basically killed everyone inside of it, like hundreds of bodies and stuff. But then she saw the dead body of a royalty, like a prince, and she was totally distraught. And it's like those two things are separate for her, like hundreds of dead working class people and one dead prince is like two separate things. And that actually comes from a conversation that Buñuel had with Dali at some point.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
This weird disconnect between where the bourgeois have this fascination with celebrities and with people that they esteem to be of a higher rank, and they just pay no attention to others. And the other line that kind of stuck out to me was one of the characters, once they kind of realized that this is a weird thing that's going on. And when it started, I wasn't sure if like they weren't going to leave, but nobody was going to acknowledge it, and they were just going to like just stay there forever, and no one would acknowledge that they wouldn't leave. But they actually do like understand their predicament. And when it starts to dawn on them, one of the characters says, "This is very strange, or maybe it's all too normal." Kind of
dun, dun, dun.
Just kind of hinting that, you know, these like anytime a social convention is broken in bourgeois society, they don't know what to do. And so they all kind of freak out if you don't kind of follow the given order.
Right. Right. Which is a classic Buñuel criticism. And, you know, let's take that forward into our next film. The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, which actually says bourgeoisie in the title. So
right.
we're getting a little more and a little more on the nose. But do you want to give us a little hint of what that's about? As best as you can.
Yeah, I'll try. So the Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie is about a group of people who want to they're trying to set up a dinner together where they'll have a meal and chat and stuff, and they can't do it. They try over and over again, and something always happens. Whether it's at the beginning, the host totally forgot that they had a meeting set up, and so they weren't ready, and the husband wasn't home, and the wife was in her robe and everything, or the military comes in the middle of the dinner.
Yeah, because they agreed to host them for war games.
Right.
But the schedules got crossed.
And then, or it was just all a dream.
It was all a dream.
The original dream within a dream situation, as far as I could tell.
Yeah, the end gets really confusing.
Yeah, by the end, I have no idea, like, everything I thought I knew about the movie was gone by the end.
Yep. But it does follow the story of these 6 bourgeois characters.
Yeah.
In Paris.
2 couples, and then a ambassador from some Latin American country
which is
I don't
clearly
think
set up to
exists.
be some. It's supposed to be some kind of dictatorship in the.
Yeah, the country is called Miranda, which, as far as I know, does not actually exist.
That's not a country in Latin America. And I might catch flack for this if it really is. It's not. It's not. I guarantee you it's not a country in Latin America.
Right. But the funny thing is that it's almost set up as this country that nobody knows about. So he's talking to, like, everyone wants to talk to him about Miranda, the country, but they keep confusing it with other Latin American countries. Like, oh, I heard your pyramids are great. And he's like, oh, well, you know, Peru has the
no one knows where Miranda is.
Yeah, and going back to our conversation about, you know, how the story just carries a vehicle for different things to happen. Like, I don't know, we've described that they're trying to have a dinner party. So other than that, all we could really describe are the things that happen in this movie, and kind of talk about them. So there's like a side character who's a priest who comes to one of the couple's houses and asks if he can take over their gardening responsibilities and stuff because he wants to be working out in the community, that kind of thing, along with his priestly duties. So he like ends up, they really like him for some reason, so they keep inviting him to the dinner parties, even though he has like no reason to be there. But none of them have a reason.
I guess if you have a bishop as your gardener, you might as well invite him to dinner.
Yeah,
as long as he's not like a jerk.
Yeah. And he was a fun character, but he had this weird backstory about his parents being murdered, and that culminates at the end.
He just like brings it up, randomly.
But there's actually a commentary about the bourgeoisie and the way that his character is introduced, where he had already put on his gardener's outfit and he goes to he comes to their door. He's like, "Hi, I'm a bishop. I'd like to be your gardener." And they're like, "You're no bishop. Where do you get off with this?" You know, like,
yeah,
because they
just get all like mad at their maid for letting him in earlier,
and then he leaves and comes back in his priest clothes again. And they're like, "Oh, we're so sorry." So This is another film like Exterminating Angel where everything is just like, even if they're doing really, not nice things, it's just drenched in so much politeness and like, "Oh no, it's fine." It's okay.
Everyone's like overly polite,
but it's like they're so dismissive of everyone. Like that's the thing I felt through this whole thing, is that it's like a group of 6 utterly self-absorbed people.
Oh yeah,
just going through. So it's like,
totally.
They'll be having coffee or something. The women are all having coffee at some point, and this soldier comes up and has this story about how his mom was killed and his dad was killed.
Well, the ghost of his mom told him to kill his dad.
The ghost of his mom tells him to kill his dad, who she says really isn't his dad, but killed his dad in a duel. And so he poisons his dad's milk when he's like 12 or something. And they just listen to him. And they're like, "Oh, that's nice." And then they leave.
Hello, my name is Ignio Montoya.
But then he comes back with the soldiers when they interrupt the dinner.
Yeah.
And they're like, "All right, well, the things have started. We have to go do our training and all this stuff." And then he's like, "Oh, by the way, sir, I had a dream." "Oh, everyone sit down. We have to listen to his dream."
It's like this one guy's just like a really excellent storyteller.
I know. And it was a fascinating, weird dream. But it's like they were about to go off on like military duty and like, everyone halt for this dream story.
Yeah.
And then like, no, tell the one about this. And like, "Oh, we don't have time for that.
We'll do it later."
But that was the other thing, is like so they all get together to have dinner, and then 5 minutes into it, the army shows up, and so they get out another table and a bunch of chairs and all this stuff. As soon as they all sit down for dinner again, they're like, "Oh, we gotta go." So they just pulled out all of this stuff for nothing, but they were too polite to say, "Oh no, we've already started eating. Can you come back
Please
tomorrow?"
come back later. Or maybe not even like invite them to dinner. Like they're there for work.
Yeah, they weren't. Yeah, they weren't even.
They were doing war games.
Yeah,
war games against a different segment of the French army. But they just decided to have dinner instead because that would be polite.
Yeah. So, and then by the end, you can't really tell which parts of the movie happened and which didn't.
Yeah, because we'll keep having a scene, and then a character will wake up, and it'll be like, "Ooh, it was a dream." And
then another character will wake up, and apparently they were having the dream that the other character that was having. And so by the end, it's like, was this entire movie a dream? Because there's no, like in other movies that have dream sequences and stuff like this, like say Paprika or Inception, you have a start point where you can always trace back to when the character went to sleep.
Right.
And sometimes that's vague, but like that vagueness is part of the story, like in Inception. Mm-hmm. But you at least have theories like, okay, this is the part where Leonardo DiCaprio went to sleep. But in this movie, he just wakes up and you're like, okay, so from which point on were we in a dream?
Exactly. Is our reality just a dream? Are we dreaming right now?
Maybe we dreamed about the whole movie. You never know.
Man, I'd be impressed if we did all this work for the podcast in a dream.
Yeah.
Right on. But that's back to the surrealist thing, And
that goes back to Un Chien, andalou, where, it's a merging of dreams and a bringing dreams to a physical medium where people can see them and stuff. And so you could see Buñuel, and Buñuel had a fascination with dreams his entire life. I mean,
which makes sense. That tracks.
Yeah, he has a quote where he says that if you were to tell me I have 20 years left to live, I would say I'll take 2 hours of activity a day, and I'll have the other 22 hours a day of just sleeping and dreaming, as long as I can remember my dreams. And he kept track of his dreams, and he would incorporate them into other movies and stuff like that. And that's kind of what the surrealists were after, is that dreams are kind of the purest form of your subconscious kind of coming through, and when you can remember them, it's this really weird and surreal experience.
Yeah. And they have that the same pseudo randomness that surrealist films have.
Right.
So it's because I used to think before this week at least that surrealism just meant random, which isn't entirely true.
Right. That's kind of how it manifests itself.
Yeah,
but
it's kind of about being shocking and kind of following that freeform thought in the same way that a dream does. Mm-hmm. Kind of where if you actually look back and connect the dots, okay, it kind of makes sense. But when you're just going through it, it feels random. And I think Buñuel does a good job of that, of keeping it kind of like free-flowing and random and still shocking, because trust me, by the third or I guess the fourth film that I watched this week for this podcast, I was expecting some weird stuff and some shocking stuff, and it could still get you. It can still sneak up on you.
And I watched 2 extra films that you did, and The Phantom of Liberty kind of culminates all the things we've been talking about and brings it to a whole nother level where there's almost not even that through line, and it's just the most ridiculous. It's almost like Opposite Day, the movie. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Especially, I was really surprised, especially in this film, The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, with the repetitive dream sequences where we just keep being in someone's dream and being in someone's dream and being in someone's dream. Even when I was consciously thinking, okay, I'm 90% sure we're in a dream right now. But whatever was happening in the scene was so weird, and the way we exited the scene was so shocking that I was still like, oh, it was another dream. Yeah. Like it still gets you.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that, the character will wake up and so like, okay, boom, back in the real world. And the scene will play out that seems totally normal until one thing happens that's off. And like someone takes out a gun and shoots another person in the middle of a dinner party. And you're like, okay, with that, wait, are we real now or are we not?
Right?
No, we're not.
Nope.
Yeah, but I don't even know where I was going.
That's a pretty accurate summation of this week. I don't even know.
I don't even know.
But with that, do you wanna transition into overall notes?
Yeah. So we've already kind of talked about several of these things, but just kind of we want to talk about Buñuel's technique a little bit, which he didn't necessarily have like a technique. He wasn't necessarily trained. He had spent a lot of time around film sets and studios and stuff like that. But in Mexico, especially, where he had some very small budgets and tight timelines, he's kind of known for his economical filmmaking, where he could, shoot a film in a couple of weeks, and
he shot a few of his films in like a day.
Yeah, and edit them incredibly quickly, and he even made 3 films in 1 year. At 2 separate times, he did 3 films in a year, which is kind of crazy. Some films take multiple years to make one film. Right.
And it goes beyond time. Like being that creative, like the creative act of making a film, wrapped up with all the business and logistics that go along with it, is just that's an exhausting thing to do.
Right.
And to do 3 of them in 1 year is really impressive.
Yeah.
Even if they're lower budget type deals, maybe especially if they're lower budget type deals, and he's really big on staying within the budget and learning to work almost with always the budget,
under budget, under time, all that kind of thing. He even had a conversation with another filmmaker. I want to say it was Man Ray, but I don't remember. But he said, you're a big filmmaker, you've made films for millions of dollars, just do an experiment and make a film for a couple $1,000s or whatever. He was like, what, are you kidding me? People would totally discredit me right off the bat if they saw that. So it's this thing where he was able to do with much less resources and create just as moving and thought-provoking art as people with millions of dollars.
Yeah, I think it's kind of you just get the sense of confidence in his artistic ability around Buñuel.
Yeah, it's almost a mixture of confidence and ambivalence, where he's just gonna make it. He doesn't care what anybody thinks. He's so used to negative critical reaction that he just is not even fazed by it by the end of his career.
Yeah, which led him to making some really fascinating, really interesting films.
Right.
In his later years.
Yeah, so these are kind of like we've seen a lot of the things that kind of went into how Buñuel ended up thinking about movies and the way that he created them in order to subvert the way that films are made and the way that we think about social conventions and stuff. And a lot of these films have like a really a lot of critical attention. The fact that Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie won an Oscar. Several of his films won Cannes Awards, and a lot of other kind of like, film festival, got a lot of film festival attention throughout his career. Most of his well-known films are in the Criterion Collection and all this kind of stuff. And we can see how what the Surrealists started with, creating images with film that go against the way that our brain would think about film, like from the beginning of the time people were using film. So it's like, this is right at the beginning of film as a medium. So film is in its little baby infancy stage, and they're trying to show, a train going by or the Great Train Robbery where everything is kind of, just set up normally. And the Surrealists are like, well, what if we did this? What if we take the image and flip it upside down? What if we cut it in half and do these weird things? What if we superimpose one image on another that don't go together? And now, like, those seeds started with this tiny little movement of a group of filmmakers, and now those kind of images just pervade all of our film that we watch in one way or another. Like, even in more structured films, we see hints of those surrealist images in Christopher Nolan with things like Inception, and Tim Burton has some of that kind of stuff in it. And even just films that we've talked about on the podcast have a lot of that kind of imagery too.
I'd say it'd be hard to look at some of the seemingly random stuff in Miyazaki movies and not see like a surrealist influence on it. And maybe not directly, like, I'm not saying Miyazaki is a big Buñuel fan. He might be. But those or let me put it this way. The history of film, like the history of any kind of art form, is a history of innovation and changes and trends. And surrealism was another one of those that came along and helped shake up things. So nothing got too dry and nothing stayed too stagnant. And you're right, we can still see the effects of stuff like that today. In kind of, films that are a little out there and a little weird. Even think of like Carruth.
Yeah, Carruth too.
With Upstream Color. Like, that is a kind of a weirdly structured, shocking, surrealist type film. Yeah,
almost a subconscious kind of flow to the way that you watch it. You get images by their association to one another rather than the way that film language tells you to think about it. And it's not to say that film wouldn't have come to these surreal and subconscious kind of images on its own.
Right.
But the surrealists kind of gave that a kickstart. Right. Here, let's do this. And they just kind of did a bunch of stuff in a small period of time that, like we were saying, rippled throughout all other kind of films.
Right. Some of the things in film come up naturally over time, but sometimes it needs a dedicated group of people to come along and consciously shake things up. And I'm appreciative of that because it makes it a little easier to study them. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah,
to be like, they declared themselves. They were very, very obvious about what they were trying to do, and they ended up achieving some very interesting things. Even if most people would look at, maybe I'm giving most people the short end of the stick, but I would assume most people would look at a Buñuel film and be like, "What? That's so weird. Why would anyone watch that?"
I mean, we did that too, but I'm like,
I kind of had the same experience. But I also appreciated, like, there were some really interesting thoughts, really interesting themes, really interesting things to watch. Funny moments, dramatic moments, lots of shocking moments.
Yeah. I kind of like the fact that even if they don't mean anything, the surrealists were able to create some incredibly provocative images, which can then, like we've talked about on the podcast before, be recycled into other art that maybe has more of like, take this and think about it in this way and give it more of a message to it, even if the surrealists were just kind of throwing stuff together and like throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what happens.
Right. It's another piece of a puzzle that you can learn from and take and make the own stuff that you create or we create a little better and a little different. And I'm not saying you have to. I'm not saying you have to take something from everything. But if you see the images and the style and the thought process behind surrealism and you like it and you want to incorporate it into your own stuff, go ahead and do it. Take from it, learn it, make it your own.
Good artists borrow, great artists steal.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what the Surrealists did. They took film and made it their own. Made it weird, made it wacky, but made it their own. And that's really interesting.
So this was a great kind of analysis of a pretty unique director. Like there's no other director out there that's exactly like Buñuel, especially not the kind that we've talked about. It's just so different. And it was a really interesting experience this week. But Buñuel has some kind of contemporaries that there are directors who have built their work off of the strange and off of the irrational. And we'll be talking about one of those next week. Who's that, Alex?
We're going to be talking about the one and only David Lynch of Twin Peaks fame, which is coming back, and we're both very excited about it. So we are going to take a look at three of our favorite movies of his. And
I have actually not seen any of them.
Really?
I have not seen any of these.
Well, this will be an interesting week. I haven't seen Eraserhead. Okay. But I've seen the other two.
Yeah.
So this will be interesting. But the three we're going to watch are Eraserhead from 1977, which I might be working on the haircut for. Not for long, but for now. Blue Velvet from 1986. And our last movie is Mulholland Drive from 2001, which was supposed to be the number one movie of the newest century. Maybe a bit prematurely, but...
Yeah, I don't know what list that's on. But no one needs to be making a list of this century 17 years in.
Some big authority on movies put it out. I can't remember who. But it seems a little early. I mean, we're only 17 years in.
Yeah.
Come on, y'all.
Maybe of the decade, but I don't know.
Maybe of the decade, of the 2 decades. But yeah, so that's about all the time we have for this episode.
If you have movie suggestions for us or just want to reach out, I can be found on Twitter at JSSatchel.
And I'm at Alex Garinger.
And to find links to stuff that we talked about today, you can find them on the blog at thefilmlings.wordpress.com.
If you like the show, let us know. Leave us a review on iTunes so other people will know what we are all about.
We definitely appreciate it.
Well, talk to you next week.
All right, see ya.
Fantastic.